and welcome to the Cynic Weekly, the original 90-minute Cynic podcast since 2011. I'm your host, Christopher Gallagher, and we've got an action-packed podcast for you. It's the 26th of November. Usually we record on a Thursday, but today we're recording a day before due to the Feyenoord game. We've got lots to talk about, and we have a powder punch. No, powder punch is the wrong. I mean,
you say powder puff? I was like,
yeah. Off to a bad start. Very much the old 90-minute Cynic podcast. We've got the greatest podcast panel since time began. It's Barry Gallagher. Hello, Barry. How are you, sir?
Very well, thanks. As you say, just kind of casting my eye over the rundown, and there's many, many things. So let's get to it. We're also joined by the wonderful Stuart Dugan. Hello, Stuart. How are you, friend?
I'm good. I was confused by the powder stuff, but I'm ready to put it to one side and get down to business.
I mean, I could edit it out, but I'm going to leave it.
Let's do it. Let's
the realness of it, yeah.
That's it. We are real. We do not edit. There is lots to talk about. I'll give you a brief sort of summation of what we're going to talk about. We'll talk about the Celtic AGM. We'll talk about the St Mirren game. We'll talk about the fact that we're maybe on the verge of getting a new manager, a couple of transfer rumours, and then we'll look towards the games that are coming up because, my goodness, it's going to become a busy time over the next couple of weeks. But we do, as always, have an opening question. And the opening question is one that, it's kind of, I don't think there's an actual definitive answer, but I want to get your thoughts on it. So, the opening question: has the club ever been so divided as it is now? And what are the long-term effects of this negativity? Interpret that however you want. We'll start with you, Barry.
It's interesting because when we were talking last Thursday, we were talking about like the disconnect and stuff, and boy, did we predicted that there would be sort of an animated AGM, but we could never have predicted of how wild it was going to be. And I can't remember a time. Probably my sort of Celtic supporting life started in like about 94. So I was probably too young to appreciate what was happening. Obviously, the references of last week about the COVID season, and at that point we weren't there. We weren't able to be in the stadium, etc. And the club were maybe shielded from that. But after Friday, I can't remember a time as bad as this, and I think it's going to be we're in for the long haul. I think in terms of the collective. And I think it's going to be just sort of prolonged action now, which I fully endorse. But there's a contradiction of the board, because obviously that meeting that they had sort of the start of October, where they said everything was fine, and then you get the sort of choreographed videos, Michael Nicholson. I wonder how many takes that took. And it made me think of, see, when Robert Duvall was saying in The Godfather, he had to wear like a suit of the words for Marlon Brando's lines. I wonder if Mark Fotheringham or somebody was doing that for don't know why I chose Fozzie. I like Fozzie. He was maybe doing that for Nicholson because everything was sort of polished and it was one take, and
it wasn't real. Yeah. It wasn't real, man.
It wasn't real. But in terms of, I know we'll come on to talk about it in more detail, but I think just the disdain that the board have for shareholders, let alone ordinary supporters as well, it's just horrific. And I think the point that you've been making on the agenda, Gal, was that there's so many people who are just sort of, they think because these guys have money and because they're old and they wear a suit that you have to sort of respect them, and they don't deserve any respect. And it's very much the case of Celtic belongs to us, like it's our club. It doesn't belong to them, and we can't be talked down to by these men who have got in power because of their money. And it's quite frankly disgusting, I think, the way that they spoke to the room on Friday. Not just Ross Desmond, as we'll talk about, but Peter Lawwell as well. And yeah, it just feels very fractured, and I don't think there's anything that this board can do to fully get everyone back on board. They could go out and spend 50 million in January, which, I would love that, but it's not going to change things because it's just a chasm, the difference between the board and the fans. And I think probably the thing that I'm taking sort of positivity out of is that I think more and more people are starting to see how detached these people are from not only how a football club should be run, but how society works and how reality works. So it's a long answer for that, but I just feel that we're in for the long haul now, that the negativity is going to continue. And I frankly don't care if it's people are saying it will affect the team or anything like that, because it's bigger than that now for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Great points, Barry. Stuart, yourself, in terms of how have you dealt with this week, what's your kind of thoughts?
Well, yeah, like I was reflecting just before we started about how week to week, how much it's kind of staying the same, and yet there's so many things happening every week at the club, whether it's escalations one way or another. But I just mean, like, the opening question last week was reasonably similar, where we were looking at different points in history where the club's been quite fractured or quite divided. And now I would have to say probably, yeah, since 94, I think was the way that the question was phrased last week, this is as bad as it's been. Because I think that in terms of a division, it's such the line has never been clearer than it was after what happened on Friday. And particularly because the way that the AGM has been reported and spun by the board was that, you know, this was disrupted and it wasn't going to go this way. But the alternative, if everyone had, you know, if there'd been no red cards, no walkouts or whatever, that statement was still written and was still to be read. So that was always how it was going to play out, and that is the attitude. And when Barry speaks about the sort of contradictions, not only of, you know, a couple of months ago there weren't any problems and now there kind of are, and a sort of tacit acknowledgement of them or downplaying of them, you have this new party line of preaching unity, but yet they're stoking such extreme division. And it's almost like, look, we all need to get together now, but after we've just got one last wee dig in because we don't like that we've had to endure this the last couple of weeks. And in terms of how, when you asked like how you're dealing with it, how it's been, I was so scunnered on Friday, like genuinely just really scunnered that that's the way that had gone, that's the situation, and that we are so deep in this now that there is no way back. And I was chatting to my wife about it because she was like, "You're right," basically. And I was just chatting about a few things, and I was like, "Look, I need to try and explain this situation to you so that you understand that it's not just this, oh, your team lost sort of thing, which I understand can, you know, we're terrible for it. We're, you know, a bad result can ruin your whole day, week, year, whatever." When we first started dating, she had no real background in sports, had no real interest in it, and one of the questions that she always used to ask was like, what do you actually support? Because Lorenzo was talking about it on the agenda, the nature of the football club, and Celtic is no different than any other. They're transient. The managers, the players, the form, everything comes and goes. So what do you actually, who are you supporting? Like, why are you supporting this player now and then he's a rat when he leaves and whatever? What are you supporting? And it's quite an abstract question when you think about it. But the best way that I could put it to her was that whatever she's been asking what we support now feels very much under fire, and that's what's under attack. And that's what we now feel, if it's really important to you, that's what you have to fight for. This intangible thing that whatever Celtic is to you is a billionaire talking down to the working class, and that's, I'm not suggesting that I'm some working class hero and that's why I feel offended. I'm just appalled that this thing that I love is run by these people and that they're allowed to put out messaging like that and get away with it relatively consequence free at the moment.
Yeah.
And generally speaking, you know, if you have a manager that you don't like and they don't perform well, they will eventually lose their jobs. And it feels at the moment like you have these people that are doing really bad things at your club that is very successful in spite of them, but they're being allowed to act however they want, consequence free. And I so desperately want there to be consequences that you can just have, it's not acceptable to be at a club like Celtic and behave like that and to speak like that. And it's not just, I know we're going to come on to talk about it, it's not just, oh, this is a radical ultras movement that we don't like. The way they spoke, even when you see the pictures of the AGM, there's a really good shot from the front of the crowd. It's all people that are like, with, you know, with respect to you, Gall, you're probably one of the youngest people in that room, you know, as you look
Thank
around. It's rare you can say it, but that's it. And the lack of dignity that's given to these people that have given their lives to the club just makes me sick. Like, it's real stomach churning stuff. And it's so hard now to enjoy Celtic and to be passionate about it without being so entrenched in all of this stuff and trying to find a way through it.
I mentioned that we do the agenda on a Monday, and it was very heated and it was very passionate. You can sign up for the Cynic at the cynic.co, 32 podcasts a month, of course. Reactions, news, everything. Get involved. We also have a new James Forrest print, which is available. Check it out if you go to the cynic.co for Christmas. But it was the Celtic AGM. There's this idea that, as Barry kind of alluded to, and we talked about it on the agenda, that men in suits equal respectability, which equals power, which equals a dynamic that you are not allowed to approach or break. That the classism that's dripping from Ross Desmond as he scolds the Celtic support. Ross Desmond, who has absolutely no right to be on that bench. He's not a Ned. He's not in any way connected with the board. He has no right to be there. And he's telling me, essentially, that I'm ungrateful and that I have offended the board and I've put their family in a different... Do you know what? I'm just going to read some of it out because it's disgusting. We will not be railroaded by those whose only vocation in life is to be anti-establishment and by those who try to degrade the club. Our board, led by Peter, and our executive, led by Michael, are dedicated Celtic people. The attempts to dehumanise and vilify them are shameful. These are people with families. They love the club every bit as much as anyone here, and when we are not performing, they're suffering. They do an outstanding job, and we're lucky to have them. We are lucky to have them. Michael Nicholson is on £800,000 a year, over that. Celtic's turnover is just about £100 million. That's insane. That's insanity. We're giving jobs to people because they're good Celtic men. I mean, that's literally what he's saying. He talks about Europe. Those who talk about the club not having kicked on in Europe ignore the enormous change in the management landscape of football in that period. It's created a gap which keeps growing. It's created a gap which keeps challenges for clubs of our league and smaller European league. As if we don't fucking watch football. Like, they're talking to us, talking down to us with such disdain. I don't want to have to explain this again to you. We're actually good in Europe. We're the ones who are going to every fucking game. A real cretin. Barry, thoughts?
Yeah, it's again back to that sort of hypocrisy and double standards. Like, the first thing I thought of, and probably weirdly, but see the fact that that's coming from Desmond, who basically character assassinated Brendan Rodgers. Does Brendan Rodgers not got a family?
Very good.
Yeah, and yeah, the very same week where supporters are getting their doors literally taken off the hinges for a breach of the peace, have they not got families? So it's, forgive me for not feeling sorry for these old grey white men in suits who have never experienced hardship in their life. And yeah, it's just that, like, we're not asking for us to win the Champions League. And I think the point that I think Martin made in the reaction was that in the time that they're talking about, our rivals have been in 2 European finals, and they've been a basket case in that whole time. And when you think of the sort of roll of dishonour of all the teams that have knocked us out in qualifying, like, they're so... They want to protect themselves so much that they're missing clear and obvious failings, and they like to pat themselves on the back for having the 77 million in the bank. But if you think of all those campaigns where we've fallen at the first or second or third, however many qualifier hurdles we've had to face, we could be sitting with about 250 million in the bank just now, and we could have a proper footballing department. The stadium could be 7,000-8,000 seater more in capacity, and it could be a really good place to go. But like everything, they've half-assed everything that they do, and I think they're so sort of insular now, and they're so sort of trying to protect themselves that they're stumbling over themselves. Everything they put out now is an embarrassment. Not saying that it hasn't always been, but particularly the last year or so, they shoot themselves in the foot time and time again. And to go back to the point I made earlier, I think more and more people are starting to see that now. Yes, that there's people who still kind of, as we'll come on to, think it's like, oh, it's the Green Brigade's just a collective or whatever, but you can't tell me that the majority of Celtic fans would have seen all of that come out on Friday and not be utterly embarrassed and have their back up, because, as Stuart says, billionaires telling people who put their life and soul, every penny into the club, how to think and how to act, isn't going to wash anymore. So my hope is that this is the sort of the final nail in their coffin, but also it'll be such a victory for the collective, because more and more people will see that they need to join this or they need to back the collective.
Yeah, I think also... sorry, Stu, you come in.
Yeah, I just wanted to make one quick point on Desmond's notion that, that these individuals are being dehumanised and being bullied and all that. As if when Celtic had this disastrous transfer window, and as if after they were knocked out of the Champions League by Kairat Almaty, that the board came out and with contrition said, look, we have got this badly wrong. We're genuinely very sorry. We are going to redouble our efforts. And I know that they've done that sort of shit before, and you see through it and you read through it and whatever. They didn't even bother with that this time around. It was like, oh, fucking you, shut up. You know what I mean? You know the deal. This collective and this movement started because of a lack of accountability and a lack of communication. So it's not like we've just decided to round on them for no reason. It's very much... And it's also not on the fact that they just haven't been very good this season. They've not been very good for a number of seasons in these very specific departments. And then when asked by a large swathe of the support, quite rightly, to just answer the questions, they haven't shown a lick of contrition or even like a modicum of respect for people that go and give their life to Celtic. So it's apples and oranges the way that he's talking about it. And that's also what's really frustrating, because it's extremely Trumpian, the way that he is giving you a version of reality that is not true. And even more so, the double statements on Friday are fucking insane. And they're becoming more and more just like right-wing propaganda. Sorry, actually, this is the version of the truth. This is the version of reality. And here's a video clip that will provide that truth. And you're like... well, just because it's multimedia doesn't mean that that's true.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, there's no context for so much of what they're saying. And they've now kind of come out and publicly said, like, actually, you're the bullies, so we're going to shut this down and we're going to do a wee vote, and you weren't here for it, but everyone actually thinks that we're cool. And much like this abstract concept of what Celtic is, a lot of people that, whatever your political leanings are, and I'm not here to sort of tell people what to think one way or other, oftentimes it's not that, you don't like Donald Trump. It's more that you're quite concerned about the notion of democracy. And that's kind of where we're at just now, where all the levers and all the signs point towards like really bad state of affairs with this thing that we love so much. And so I just wanted to make that point, that they keep bending reality. And I think that irrespective of whether you agree with the collective, at a certain point, you just can't stomach that anymore. And you're like, wait a minute, don't talk to me like I'm a fucking idiot. And I think that that's maybe where they keep sort of stepping on rakes, as we say.
Yeah, and see, the thing is, like, I know we talk about the 90s a lot, because we're all in our, late 30s, early 40s. But see the idea that the club was jeopardised in the 90s, so we don't want to make that mistake again. They've got £80 million in the bank.
Club won the European Cup in the 60s. I would quite like to see that referenced as like something that would be aspirational. And it certainly wasn't anything to do with the money that was spent. So
what would Jock Stein say?
Oh, any for his thoughts. I keep thinking about this, how riled up Jock Stein would just be at Moya Nussy's mobile phone.
Oh, that was brilliant, yeah.
Just a couple of things. I was in the room for it, and the fact is, Peter Lawwell, so the polling card, basically, where you basically fill in your polling card and you put it in the box, and that's counted up because this came to an end because they didn't have time to vote on the things they had intended to. There's a video where it's like Peter Lawwell says that you couldn't hear it. I was in the room and you couldn't hear it, right? So you couldn't hear Peter Lawwell say that. But then as we were leaving, the the Computer Share, which is the company that kind of takes care of it, the boxes were at the door and no one was there. No one said, we need your polling cards. We're going to go. We need you to vote. Because as we're walking by, I pointed to someone because I've never been to an AGM before, and I was like, "Is that for what's that for?" And the guy said, "That's for the polling cards to put through the propositions, but that won't happen because no one said it's happening." So it was it. Yeah, and I know there's a video where you can see Peter Lowell. I think someone was trying to use it as a gotcha or something, but like I can tell you that no one heard that. He said, and the fact of the matter, that room was palpable. He didn't. He said it very quietly, but then there was no one else there coming in saying, "Here are the polling boxes. Fill in your polling cards and put them in here." We walked by about 3 of them, I think, and no one said anywhere. There was no one from Computer Share there at all, and so that leads to the fact that they get 99%. Fucking, they all passed, and everything's grand and everything's perfect. It's a total stitch up, and I think this was pre-planned. I really do. And also, when Lowell came back. After they had by the way, all of this is we did a reaction straight afterwards, which you can listen to. It's on this feed, so I think it's 2 or 3 podcasts back. You can go back and listen to it kind of step by step. I don't want to go over it because there's no point going over it step by step, but it was palpable. I mean, what do you think the fallout's going to? Do you think there's going to be more fallout from this, Barry?
I think so, yeah. Do you know what? Normally, I know that the results might suffer, but I'm quite glad that they can't just present us with a new shiny. Well, they might do with the manager, but they can't present us with a new shiny 2 or 3 signings right now, unless it was pre-contract signing, because they can't hide behind that. And I think it's interesting, again, you were mentioning on the agenda that people from the outside probably think, oh, they're not happy because of the transfer window, or they're not happy because of losing to Kairat Almaty. But if you're not immersed in it and you're not kind of living and breathing Celtic day to day, you don't understand like how this decline has been coming from over a number of years, and it's all come to a head now. And I keep going back to, I think that the board they have no idea how to get out of this, and I don't think there's anything that they can do to get out of it, and that's why they're kind of lashing out and saying outlandish things, because they're so rattled. And I think that the pressure needs to continue, and what that will look like, I'm not sure. I think it will be kind of protests at games. Maybe there'll be a boycott. I don't know. But yeah, I think there's no way out for them for this, and that's why they are sort of kind of lashing out and making mistake after mistake, because they're probably so insular that they never expected it to. They probably thought that O'Neill and Maloney will come in, they won a couple of games, they won the semi-final against Rangers, things will go back to normal. And you're kind of sort of hearing those sound bites from maybe within the club that we'll fix this, but it's not up to the players or the manager, the coaching staff to fix this, because it's gone beyond them now. And as Stuart says, like, it is more than just the matches. We've said on here, I know you're the same, Gall, that I find it very hard, very difficult to separate what's happening on the pitch from what's off it, because obviously the elation, as we'll come on to talk about, when McGregor scored that 94th minute, it's an actual reaction because it feels so good and we love the club, but it's just a sort of side issue now because of all the sort of fallout off the pitch, and we need to get this right for a club, because how long have we been saying we're like, wouldn't even want to give it a percentage of how much untapped potential, because we could be far better than we are, and that's what the people on the board don't realise. They think they're doing a great job, but we're nowhere near what we could be if it just took a wee bit of foresight and a bit of ambition.
Yeah, sure.
Also, just not even the untapped potential, they are year on year lowering the bar and the threshold for what's acceptable at a club like Celtic. So this notion of being a big club that's very successful, that wins trophies, that's the margins in that are very thin, and you're seeing that now. If Callum McGregor doesn't score that goal in the 95th minute, when Celtic have been fucking dreadful, like as bad a game of football as you'll ever see, Rangers would be 3 points behind you after having one of the worst managerial appointments maybe in the club's history, being a complete basket case, spunking £30 million on absolute dross. But yet in that small period of time, they've been able to keep distance with us, and they've also managed to strip out all of those elements from the club, the manager, the footballing director and the chairman, and they've said, we've got this badly wrong, we're going to address it. Maybe they'll fuck it again. Hopefully they do. It's always extremely funny. But that's how fine that margin is. And if we continue on with this like lowering of standards, it's very easy to not win the league. And it's very easy to then not even get like Europa League qualifying because of the state of the coefficient. And then you downsize and you downsize and you downsize yourself into the justifications that they've built in when the club were very successful in earning a lot of money. And that is absolutely completely shameful, irrespective of what the club could be on top of that.
What I think's hilarious is that video where the video basically was like, well, we have to keep money aside for a rainy day, or it's Michael Nicholson, so it's, well, we have to keep money for a fateful day. Well, robots have robots will get more personality. But he's like, we have to keep money aside for a rainy day because the coefficient's so bad. It's bad because of us. Yeah. We are the reason it is bad. You are cause and effect, Mr. Nicholson. You know, Mr. AI Nicholson. It doesn't really work. Sorry, Barry, go on.
Yeah. And again, it comes back to taking no responsibility or accountability for their actions. And as Stuart says, it does. It is bleak. Like, we are kind of teetering on. We're hoping that, not to jump too far ahead, but we're hoping a new manager will come in and can sort of see us to the January transfer window. But there's no guarantees that even if we were to spend a substantial amount of money in January, it's going to fix this, or fix it even short term to try and get us over the line to win the league. So they are gambling with, or they have gambled already, and they're starting to, the chickens are coming home to roost. As Colin was saying, it's never good chickens. But
because see, next season is the last real. Next season is the last easy attempt to get into the Champions League, because you only have to play one qualifier. So this is the last season where actually you push the boat out a little bit and you'll get, well, like we should have done this fucking season, but like that's the kind of last time. After that, you're talking about 3 qualifiers, which you've seen the history with Celtic and qualifiers.
To be fair though, the more Champions League football I watch and the more Celtic I watch, that squad are, to quote Paul Merson, a gillion miles away from being even remotely competitive in the Champions League. And I think it would be, God forbid we'd got past Kaira Almaty on penalties, it would be properly excruciating. And I just don't think I suppose when you're talking about, what's at stake in the years to come, this next season is the hardest. With those people at the helm and with the way that they conduct themselves and their footballing operations, it's not possible to overturn that squad in such a period of time from where it is now to where it would need to be even remotely competitive. And I think that would be the case even for next season. I can't think of a time when we've turned around the squad to such a degree.
Yeah, also just, we'll talk about football more. As I say, we have a reaction to the AGM, which is in the feed. Go and listen to it because it's very interesting. Myself, Martin and Claire were all there and we gave kind of first-hand accounts of everything that happened. But just the Celtic Collective, people have maybe an idea that it's the Green Brigade and a few other people. It's 400 CSCs, fan groups, media outlets, and obviously the ultra groups all signed up to this. It's not the Green Brigade versus the club. The Celtic Collective is a collective of supporters who are demanding change for the better for Celtic. And we're going to push that point consistently. And there is some action that's been released today. Check out the Celtic Fans Collective on Twitter at CFC_collective. And it highlights everything. And we'll discuss that as we move on. And we'll keep it very much in the prominent headlines. The St Mirren game, Christ. Woo! What a shower of shite that was, eh? Stuart, Saturday night ruined,
Pretty much, man, yeah. Really, really, really bad. We got like ragdolled by St Mirren, and not in like a sort of physical way, like we're not up to the physicality of it. Just like they were much like quicker, just basic stuff. I thought that it reminded me of the Dundee game, but we didn't concede, and then we scored a goal from just an incredible piece of quality. And I feel like that whole Dundee game, you were just desperately hoping someone would bail you out with an incredible piece of quality, and it didn't happen on that day. And it was so unbelievably bad and so bleak, and really underlines not only the state of maybe, well, separate them out. The new manager bounce and the good vibes of the O'Neill Maloney fresh lick of paint is gone, absolutely dead in a ditch. But just the squad, like huffing fumes, and the people that you're turning to and expecting a tune out of, and it's so easy for the standards to change, like I was talking about just overall, that you become less aghast at the notion of Johnny Kenny starting for you, and then less appalled that he is literally the only striker at the club that's fit. And that's before you then look at a better example is, and I think he deserves a lot more credit than he's been getting this season, Liam Scales is now like nailed on one of your best performers. That's really alarming. That is really alarming, because I'm sure that people would still love to upgrade on that position. And then you just look all the whole way across the squad and just really worrying. And even players that had like a little uptick in form, like Engels, Hatate, etc., really poor. And the only positive I can say is that we won. It's not at a point now where there's any positives to be had from dropping points or losing. Like, oh well, maybe that'll cause some change in the dugout or whatever. You just have to keep winning games by hook or by crook, and even if they're as horrible as that, that is the only positive that you can take from it. It was dreadful.
I kind of think so. With every game, we do a reaction. We react to the game afterwards. We also do a debrief where we look at the stats and tactics analyst side of it. So again, cynic.co. But something that really highlights it, Barry, is Celtic's PPDA, which is passing per defensive action. So what that basically means is how many times the opposition pass before we press them. So it's usually around 6 or 7. So they make 6 or 7 passes and we get them. And that shows you how our intensity, right? Yeah. It was 12.7. So we were allowing them essentially 13 passes before we had any challenge on them.
Yeah, that's... I think it showed. Like, I wasn't aware of that kind of figure. But yeah, everything that made us successful last season, and then obviously the 2 seasons under Ange, where we didn't give teams a minute, and that's how we often won the ball and caught them out.
Yeah.
Europe as well, and we scored. That was a large part of our game, and that was all that was good about us, I would say. Like, that was our kind of unique selling point. Like, that's what we did well. But it kind of just... The one thing when I hear that, it makes me think of, and I don't want to single out one player, but I'm going to Daisen Maeda. He was the one-man pressing machine. I remember Brendan Rodgers saying last season that he doesn't know anyone like him in world football, and I think he was right there, because he was basically did the pressing of 3 men at times. But yeah, it just kind of smacks to the sort of malaise and the apathy that basically in every department at the club, like people are phoning it in, or they're maybe not wanting to be there, or there's just not good feeling around the place. And we initially had the bounce from O'Neill and Maloney coming in, but I kind of feel Saturday was kind of almost like the worst of Rodgers, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So we've regressed even in that period of 4 weeks or whatever it is now. So yeah, I think we need a new manager in now. I think that's clear. We need him as soon as possible. Hopefully, as we'll maybe come on to, that he could be in for maybe not the next couple of games, but the game after that. And I feel that we need that change, because the players need to know that this guy is here for the sort of long term. You hope if he's successful, and then they need to start kind of trying to impress him if they want to have any future at the club, because I feel the whole club's in limbo now, and it's felt that way probably since February of this year.
Yeah, I think, essentially, I'll bring you in a sec, Stu, just that Maloney and O'Neill could only do so much without any new, impetus they were told to essentially come in and just make sure everything we get these results or whatever, and just try and make sure that they are getting what they can from the squad. But that was always going to drop off without new, innovative, and this is where we hope with the new manager coming in, he brings a completely different outlook. But Maloney and Martin O'Neill only being the interim bosses, knowing that they're not going to be there a long time, they could only do so much, and that's why it's dropped off. Stu?
Yeah, I think what you're seeing just psychologically is the inverse of a new manager bounce, where essentially they've come in when you can only imagine how bad the atmosphere is in that Brendan Rodgers dressing room, when he's spoken about the players the way he has, and when they're interacting with that every day, it's really evident, the vibes were not good. And so you get this nice clean slate with an arm around the shoulder, with some fresh faces, people G you up, and you get excited about it all over again. That interim period has lasted far too long. And so now you get the downside where you're like, well, I've kind of impressed this guy now, so I'm playing, and you get a little bit of a drop off. And the state of the squad being what it is, there's players that could play as poorly as you want, and there's literally no one else to turn to. So they're also just, the players are probably feeling in limbo, like, I know I'm going to be asked to play like a completely different way soon. I don't know how that's going to be. I might save myself for when that real sort of challenge comes along. And I think that the performances are really starting to suffer from that. I think you even saw it. I know that the Kilmarnock game we won, and we won well, but I think the drop off at Midtjylland, and then it takes you a bit to get going in that game as well. I think that it's another example of how poorly run we are as a club, that has been allowed to happen, and that you haven't had a manager in situ for that St Mirren game. Whether that is, we've saved X money by bringing in the new manager in December, whatever it is, the opportunity cost of not bringing him in when they didn't, that's terrible English, is you could give it a financial amount, and it's worth paying, because now you've got some really difficult games, and it just puts so much pressure on him, and you kind of had a little window of time to do it. And whether they were too busy getting their AGM battle plan together, or trying to liaise with breaking down regular football fans' doors, that should never have been the priority. And it's really, really frustrating that that's another tangible thing that you're seeing on the pitch because of the way the club is run. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, if you'd said to Martin O'Neill and Sean Maloney, you've got 4 months, they could have put a plan in place where, okay, this is exactly what we're going to do. But it's always been like, I don't know if I'm going to be here for the next game. And how can you coach a squad? How can you prepare a squad for a game in 2 days' time, 4 days' time, when you're not sure whether you're going to be in charge? That's the infuriating thing. That's a complete breakdown in terms of how the board have approached this. Clown shoes, so I'd describe it. But just one point, the thing that worries me about the games coming up is that Celtic created, their XG was 0.8, so we didn't even create enough clear opportunities to score a goal, which is really concerning with the games coming up, which we'll talk about. But Wilfried Nancy, it looks like he's going to be hopefully put in charge of Celtic. I would imagine, we were all kind of chatting about it, that there was a chance maybe Friday, Barry, if Celtic don't get a great result away in Rotterdam, that it might be a way to kind of distract away from that by announcing the new manager to come in.
Yeah, I'd imagine so, and probably on the basis that O'Neill, although I think O'Neill's comments tonight, he said he can expects tomorrow night to be his last game. I don't know if either you saw that, but I suppose he's kind of been saying that for a while. Just something that came up on Live Scorer. I don't know how credible that they are. But I kind of feel that if they announced on, say, on Friday, would you expect him in the dugout for Sunday? I know we don't want to be the sort of Gio Van Bronckhorst, sort of him watching on in the stands, but it's probably too soon for someone coming from the other side of the world, essentially. But I think it would give everyone a lift, and potentially you'd imagine the first game would then be Wednesday night against Dundee at Celtic Park. But yeah, I think we all need it. And the one thing that I quite like what I've kind of read about him, and the way he kind of handles himself and the way that he kind of sees the game, but I like how he's so detached from what's going on. I think we need that. We need a fresh approach. I think we've all said kind of on pods that we want someone who doesn't have a connection with Celtic as such, because we need fresh eyes, and we need to kind of take a alternative route. The one thing I know, Stu, you and I were kind of messaging earlier about it, that it was kind of reported today. It's just Nancy and what's his assistant called? Ampadu. That's all that was kind of been reported today. Whereas yesterday, I think there was at least 3, potentially 4. There was the young guy who's been coaching since he was a 16-year-old, who's kind of really highly thought of, and that kind of worried me a wee bit, that it's gone from there's definitely 3 or 4 coming with them to now it's just him and Ampadu. But I suppose these things will be sort of ironed out. But the sooner they announce it, the better, because then we can start to prepare. And I think the impact, even psychologically, you might not get an upturn in results just on the back of this announcement, but players will need to start kind of pulling their finger out if they want to be here, and they want to be in his team.
Just looking at I did a transcript of the press conference, and the question was asked by a reporter: "You've had many special European nights as Celtic manager in the past. If this is to be your last European game, or less, will it be one to savour?" And all he says was, "I'll let you know tomorrow night. I said, you sometimes think it would be nice if it was going to be your last game that it would be at Celtic Park." So I think they've run with a clickbait headline of O'Neill says he'll stay, but essentially I think he's just saying it, because we're away on Sunday as well. So I want to get Stu's thoughts on Nancy, but what I wanted to highlight something, right? So Celtic are going for a guy who I think people don't like the fact he's come from the MLS. People don't like the fact that he's maybe not been a manager for as long as even, like past managers like Postecoglou, like Rodgers and all that. So there's 2 things happening here, right? Celtic's reputation as a football club is in fucking tatters because of how it's been managed. The Celtic board are responsible for managing how the club looks on an international level, are responsible for making sure it's not only profitable.
Profitable.
Nice Christmas delicacy.
But that it's an attractive proposition for anyone. How they've handled Brendan Rodgers recently, how they've handled these past transfer windows, they've made it less and less appealing. And don't for a second think that managers don't talk and agents don't talk and people know about things. So the fact that we're going for a manager from the MLS has put some people's backs up, and I understand that, and they will connect that with cheapness and with the board not doing their due diligence. However, what I would say is he could be successful, but like both things can be true. He might be a good candidate who can come in and do the right thing and be successful with Celtic, but also because it's the board in their mind getting someone cheap who they think this guy will come in. Both can be true. He can take this opportunity and he can absolutely run with it. I also think that Celtic in its current state isn't a particularly attractive proposition for anyone in terms of this. We don't want you to have a backroom staff. You're probably not going to get money to spend. So all these things can be true at once. Stuart, Nancy, give me something positive.
I've got quite a lot of positives on it. I was actually, Barry and my brother Ian were out last week, and it was almost like I was talking them off a ledge. And I wasn't even like, I'm not the sort of contrarian who's like, oh, he's not a Celtic man, so I'm going to go all in, or he's a stats, or what. I'm just always like to kind of call it as I see it. And a lot of the things that people attribute as negatives to Nancy, I don't really see as particularly negative. Talked about it a little bit last week that, whatever level he's managed at, he appears to have been successful by whatever the standards are at that level. And he also appears to have had a real impact on the individuals and the collective, wherever it's been. I think his Columbus Crew, obviously they won the MLS for what that's worth. It was either Montreal, I may be getting it the wrong way around, but anyway, we're talking about
Montreal impact.
Record points tallies, record goals tallies. Like, he's had a really tangible impact. There is also just like quite a lot of smart football people that have said this guy could be the guy, like he could be the next guy. And Celtic do have to try and for a lot of what you've outlined, both financially and reputationally, they have to get the guy before he becomes the guy, because we're not able to shop in markets where even perhaps someone like McKenna is financially out with our reach. So it's an out the box appointment, but I don't really necessarily see the whole MLS thing as a negative. I think it's something, it will be a stick that he's beaten with if he doesn't start well. The other kind of questions that have been put at him seem to be about character and can he handle the pressure because of the levels that he's worked at. But all indications that I've seen from, and this, I'm reading the same interviews and watching the same videos as everyone else, is that character seems to be quite a big part of the appeal with him, and that he is very robust and he's gone into situations that were shit before, albeit at different levels, and it's not fazed him at all. I think there's a lot of really unfair comparisons with like Russell Martin and stuff like that. The notion that he's this progressive coach and that won't work here. I think a huge part of that is getting buy-in from the playing staff, and something that is not really being talked about is how significant I think Alistair Johnston's role will be in all of this, where it's often reported how much influence he has in that dressing room. And if you have imagine your place of work, wherever it is, if you hear there's a new person starting and someone's worked with them and they're like, this guy's a bell end, you're not going to go for this, versus this guy, by the way, get excited about this. And I think that Alistair Johnston will very much carry that and get buy-in, and that's what he needs immediately from the players and staff. The other thing that I would say, and it's not a popular thought or opinion at this point, and to quote the great man Ross Desmond, I'm aware I'm putting a bullseye on my back by saying it, is that traditionally speaking, Celtic are quite good at appointing managers and have been for a wee while. There's obviously been the odd sort of wrong turn, but generally speaking, it seems to be an area that there is a bit of thought put into, not Neil Lennon in the showers. But I suppose I talk about the likes of a Brendan Rodgers trying to bring someone like an Eddie Howe to the club, albeit falling arse backwards into Ange Postecoglou. I think that it is a progressive appointment, and there's so much of what he represents that people do want to see at Celtic, but I think there's just a lot of fear that at a time of such upheaval you would like a really safe pair of hands to come in, but I don't think that there is such a thing. And a last thing I'll say on it, a good example of this, if you look down south, who is one of the most coveted managers in the English Premier League? Thomas Frank. Thomas Frank has gone into a big club at Spurs, and people are already calling for his head because they say that he's not able to make this adjustment and that you can't play at a club like Spurs and play the way that Brentford play. And so there is just no correct sort of safe answer.
Agreed.
Barry? See, just in terms of a sort of logistical and sort of style of play, do you see how Alistair Johnston, I probably should have checked this, but I remember the quotes about him saying like how Nancy kind of encouraged him to take risks, and almost he had this sort of quote about your sort of final touch, it's on your toes before you play it to kind of draw the attacker in. Do you think that AJ would play as one of the three centre-backs, or would he be one of the wing-backs? How did they play for him?
I am not sure. I watched a really good video about it that did have like breakdowns of, and to shout him out, Gall, who was the chap that you had on with the other guys from the collective when you had that video? It was Ryan Fitzsimmons, and there was a guy who does statistical stuff. I can't remember his name. I'm so sorry.
Oh, Quinny, yeah.
Quinny had a video of it, and it was a really good breakdown where it had like basically like the actual personnel that they'd played in certain games and positions and stuff. So if people want to go and do it, they can look at that. I would imagine that you would probably want Alistair Johnston to be one of those right wing backs, just because he is all action and can get up and down.
It's not going to be for a while.
But it's not going to be for a while. And so I think that one of the main challenges that he will have is coming in and what do you do with that playing squad. But I think anyone's going to have that challenge, so I would probably quite rather someone that had fresh ideas instead of going, right, well, we'll just play a 4-3-3 with whoever's fit or whoever normally plays there, and perhaps you will see an uptick until he can get some bodies in the door in January.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I know it was a discussion, Gall, you were having again on the agenda, but would you guys rather that he goes all in and sticks these principles straight away, or does he kind of do a kind of half sort of hybrid of what's working here? I would go all in, I think.
I think you have to.
Yeah.
I think what you've got now to continue kind of and to drip feed some of your principles in, what we have now is abhorrently bad, and it doesn't feel like we're going to be able to beat anybody. It really does. Like that St Mirren game, I don't think and this is the key point I think for me, I don't think St Mirren played particularly well. So if we were playing against a team who were a little bit sharper, maybe a little bit faster, maybe a little bit better, I think we probably would have lost on Saturday. So for me, even if it's short-term pain for long-term game, I would probably ask him and want him to come in and just be like, this is what we're doing, get used to it. Stu?
Yeah, completely. I think, again, we don't know until he's through the door, but he doesn't strike me as the sort that would come in and do something by halves. I think that, like you say, Celtic look like any old SPFL team at the moment. They just look like you could be watching Kilmarnock Falkirk, and to be honest, sometimes you'd probably see Falkirk playing some better, more expansive football than Celtic are at the moment, and I'm not saying that in a glib way, that is just factual. I think that you have to come in and establish your principles, and I think that the nature of the league this season, it will be tight, but I would think that if you continue playing the way that you are, Celtic are going to drop points. Celtic can and maybe will drop points at the weekend. It's just something that you have to do, and I think that by trying to establish this, the sooner that you can do it and get into it, the better for everyone. Get an identity. A lot of the chat about him seems to be that he wants his teams to play with character and identity, and I think that's something that he'll try and get into them as quickly as possible. And just on the quote that you had there, Barry, about Alistair Johnson saying, he wants to draw teams out and wait until, the attacker's almost on your toes before you pass the ball. I think quotes like that have really gone against him as well, where a lot of folk are saying, well, Celtic don't play against teams like that. But I've also seen plenty that suggest that he's not like a Ruben Amorim, who's just going to be like, well, this is the way we play.
Yeah.
Or like Russell Martin, actually, because that was kind of his undoing, like thinking that you can draw teams out, teams will just sit in. I think that he's got a lot more to him than that, albeit I'm basing that off videos in a very small sample size. Yeah,
just on that, I did a thread on Twitter about a lot of his principles and stuff, and it was a lot of like as mentioned about you draw strikers out and you isolate defenders, and it's all about time, and it's all about striking when the iron's hot and all that sort of stuff. And people were losing their rag, saying that'll never work in Scotland and blah blah blah. It's essentially not far off what Iraola does. And people, if we said that we were going to have Iraola as our new manager, people would go bananas. So what I think he's very adaptable, and it's just because he does it within this. I think from what I understand about him, he will look at what the level of opposition is and how the opposition play, and he will adapt. He has principles, but I think he will adapt those principles to be winning, and that's all it comes down to. He seems to be a coach who needs to win. We will cover...
Alarmingly, I actually saw a quote the other day where he said that he doesn't need to win and it's all about personal growth. So maybe not, Gal. Maybe we are fucked.
But when he has announced at the Cynic.co, we will have a reaction podcast. We'll have a tactical breakdown of how he's going to play. And we've got some other stuff lined up. So check us out at Cynic.co. Celtic play a game... Actually, do you know, before we get to the game tomorrow in Rotterdam, this is a quote from Martin O'Neill. Martin O'Neill was asked about, Nancy coming in, and he advised him to stay away out of the civil war at Celtic. Here's the quotes. I think that the new manager coming in, I think he should divorce himself from all those proceedings. That is a fresh start for him. He hasn't been party to anything that's happened in recent times. So just let's say it was me, I'd be saying, yeah, that's not got nothing to do with me. I have to try and win some football games, and then maybe at some stage or another, if we can get a real team together that can go and compete, not just domestically, but obviously in Europe, well, that would be his job. He's got a fresh start. He's going to step into something that really has been none of his concern. I mean, it's how the football club's been run. And that's the way I would be approaching it. And it's not like passing the buck. It's just saying, well, sorry, that's not my making. So the narrative, I think you mentioned it, Barry, was that this is just football, and once Celtic start winning, everything will be fine, and it's not about how the club's treating supporters or anything to do with anything outside the football, which I find quite condescending, Barry.
Yeah, but it's also listening to those quotes, and again, like, I don't want to get into the the warfare of you can't criticise Martin O'Neill, but I'm about to. I wish he'd taken that approach.
Yeah.
I wish he just said it's nothing to do with me. I'm here to win football matches, and not sort of declare his love for Dermot Desmond and he's the reason why he came to Celtic, and what would Jock Stein think, and yeah. So I wish he'd followed that advice, and maybe that is him showing a bit of contrition. Like, maybe I shouldn't have said that, and he's kind of
I don't think so.
it through that way, but I don't think so. But yeah, on your point about it's just about winning football matches, and that quote there that he said about getting a real team together, what does that say for the team that we've got just now? And whose fault is that? The people that he was quick to defend and praise on Friday. So that's the last I'll say on Martin O'Neill.
Yeah, I will never tweet about Martin O'Neill ever again. Ever again. Because you're not allowed to criticise him. But this is the thing, Martin O'Neill is one of my Celtic heroes. He is legitimately one of the greatest ever. You're allowed to criticise Celtic managers, especially when they kind of side with the billionaires over the working class. That's what I would say. But anyway, there are some transfer rumours, but we're not going to get into it. But we don't have enough time to get into that at the moment. But we do have a... Oh, also, I should say that it's been confirmed since last week, since we were last doing the weekly, that Cameron Carter-Vickers is out for the rest of the season, which is obviously a massive blow. Young Osmond, it looks like 5 months, they're saying. Yeah, so, I mean, the injuries just keep piling up. Stu?
Positives, though, I saw that Kelechi Iheanacho and Sriracha were both training today, which I genuinely think is just huge. Is when you don't have really any options in terms of strikers, and one of the, I think one of the few learnings that you have from O'Neill and Maloney coming in is that Daizer Maeda clearly doesn't want to play as a striker. He really wants to be a left winger.
Don't think he wants to play.
Well, he doesn't want to be here. He wants to be a left winger somewhere in England in January, and he will get his wish. Good luck to him. And then the notion that you can just play a striker and then sub him off for a striker, I think that's really an exciting prospect for a club of Celtic stature, and I think that would be really good to get back to, and just so that you can give, I know that the squad is on its knees, but so that you can give the manager as much at his disposal as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Just on the Iheanacho, he said, let me just get it up. So the reporter asked him, how's the squad looking injury-wise? Has Kelechi actually travelled? And Martin O'Neill replied, yes, he has. We'll see. It's the amount of work that he's got to do. Something that I will consider during the course of the next 24 hours, but he is training and he's available. And it's the same with Sriracha as well. I think Sriracha was training as well.
Send Iheanacho down that park to do shit in again, because that worked a belter last time.
Yeah.
Yep.
Just sorry to pull you up in pronunciation, Gall, but remember it's Sriracha. That's that lovely voice note that we had. It's funny, see, whenever I see his name, I won't do an impression because that's offensive, but I always say it like that now.
Sriracha.
Oh, you'll do it.
Sriracha, yes.
You'll do it anyway.
Sriracha. Okay, so just looking, obviously, the Hibs game we'll look at the Hibs game in next couple of days. Obviously, we've got this game in Rotterdam. I'm just looking at form, right? Let me just get the form up. So Celtic have obviously played 4 games, one each draw with Red Star Belgrade, then a 2-0 defeat to Braga, then a 2-1 victory over Sturm Graz, and then that horrendous game in Denmark against Midtjylland. 1 win, 2 defeats and a draw, 4 goals for, 7 against. We are currently 27th with 4 points. However, Feyenoord are 29th. They've only won 1 game, which was against Panathinaikos at home. They lost to Braga in the opening game away from home. Second, they lost then at Aston Villa 2-0 at home, and then their last game was a defeat in Germany to Stuttgart. So they're not going good guns at all. They seem to be in some horrendous form. And let me just tell you, if you're a European football team and you're in horrendous form, you can just call the the form busters, which is
I think I was going to explain it. I thought you sent a really funny meme that you'd made earlier where it says, "Do you have a struggling team? Are the fans calling for the manager's head? Can your striker not hit a barn door with a banjo? If the answer is yes, then call the form busters. We're ready to get pumped by you." And then it was a picture of the Ghostbusters and it said Celtic in Europe. And I thought that's really funny and also so close to the bone because that's exactly how it's going to go down.
It's too realistic. Thanks for that, Stu. That's nice.
That was good.
Barry, let's start with yourself. How are you feeling about this game? What's your thoughts going into it?
It's difficult because I always feel like after the Kairat debacle and then the transfer window and signing the actual after the window would close, etc., I found it really difficult to have any enthusiasm for Europe at all. And the way that things have gone since then have made it even worse. And it's not that I'm never one of these people that says, "Oh, we'll just we'll write Europe off," but it kind of feels like we're close to that because of the volume of games that we have coming up and how poor it's been domestically. But it'll probably be one of those things tomorrow where I'll start to think, "Oh, maybe we could get a result." But I don't hold out much hope at all. I've just pulled up on screen Feyenoord signings and a couple of 10 millions. 8 million, 7 million, etc. I know that they're not in the best of form, but I don't hold out any hope at all. I think it'll be another classic. They'll double tap, maybe get a goal and then another one as we're trying to reset.
Aye.
One thing I found weird was I heard it driving home tonight that they asked Van Persie about his thoughts on Celtic being a divided club. And he's like, "Oh, that's not great. Hopefully they can get back, but not tomorrow night," kind of thing. I was like, "Oh, thanks for patronising us, Robin." Join the list of people who are patting us in the head. But yeah, as we've kind of joked about there, we are people lick their lips when they're coming up against us in Europe because they know that they can get back on track against us, and I wouldn't be surprised if this kind of kickstarts them into a bit of form because they might enjoy playing someone who will give them so much space and freedom on the ball. But yeah, I don't hold out much hope. If we were to get a result, great, but it's get through it and all eyes to Sunday. And I hate that because one of the main reasons that we're all Celtic fans and what we love about Celtic and we talk about, we've had a few drinks, is European performances and European victories, and none more so under the Martin O'Neill, to be honest. But I think the squad is so weak. We're in such poor form. All the sort of off-the-field stuff and the uncertainty with the management team, etc. I think this just all points towards a hiding. So anything less than a hiding will be a pleasant surprise, and that's a horrible sort of thing to think about.
Sure, as mentioned, that passes per defensive action, just giving St Mirren, allowing St Mirren to have the ball and to set up and stuff. If we do that tomorrow, no matter how poor they are, it's just going to lead to disaster.
Yeah, you need to ordinarily in games like that, if that is your approach, you would just hope to be able to outscore them. But Celtic sometimes look like they'll never score a goal again. I think that on paper, even if you take Feyenoord's form out the window, I think this is the sort of game that, as it was last time we played them, that you should be going and trying to get something from. We beat them at Celtic Park when Slot was there, and that's fine. That's a whole other world. But it's really frustrating that you can't go in. I cannot go in tomorrow and be like, "Well, do you know what, mate? We might get a result," and I'm going to go in and expecting the worst, and I'll hope to be pleasantly surprised. But I just cannot see the team currently in this guise, the team that I saw play on Saturday. I cannot see them going and pulling out a performance. I also think, though, that as easy as it is to write off Europe, or it's the least of our worries, it's really important to not, basically, to try and get something from this game, because the new manager still has 3 games on the other side of this. You're talking about probably needing 6 or 7 points to get to that knockout playoff, or playoff rounds to get into the last 16. And I do think that that's achievable, and especially, if you can give him some time. 2 of those games fall in January, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Give him a month. Give him.
Could have new play. I don't know if they can.
They can't play by then, but you're maybe talking about getting a couple of extra bodies back. You're maybe talking about just a much better feeling around the club, and is it Utrecht, one of the last games?
That's the last game,
literally,
yeah.
Barkas is coming to Celtic Park, probably to have the game of his life. That is the most stick on.
Playing at left back.
Do you know what I mean? So if you look at that as a really winnable game, 7 points, just anything you can get out of these 3 games, buy the manager some time. If you could get a point tomorrow, if someone offered you that, I would bite their hand off, because I think that'd be a really good result.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've got Hibs at Easter Road on Sunday. Obviously, that weekend there, Hearts lost 1-0 to Aberdeen. So if we win our game in hand, we're a point behind Hearts. So that is something positively to look at. The fact that, you know, we are still very, very much in touching distance of getting to Hearts if we win our game in hand. Again, it just comes back to going to the well with these players is quite difficult. But, you know, huge game on Sunday, huge game tomorrow. Hopefully we get 6 points. I know it's obviously Europe's at 3 points in Europe and 3 points domestically, but if we can come away with even a good performance tomorrow and the 3 points from Easter Road, and the new manager starts on the Monday, game on Wednesday to get them right into it, and then they really come along thick and fast. Cup final on the horizon, lots happening. But yeah, we'll be there with you. If you check out the Cynic.co, 32 podcasts a month on average. Lots of stuff in the shop. You should check out the James Forrest print. It's a fantastic print by Claire. Check it out. And also, hopefully Celtic, at least on the pitch, can do a little bit more, and we can kind of push through. But Barry, an absolute joy as always. Anything you want to say before we finish up?
Sack the board. But thank you very much for having me.
Great stuff. Stuart Dugan, a pleasure.
Thanks very much. Thanks for having me.
Great stuff. From Barry Gallagher, from Stuart Dugan, from myself, Chris Gallagher, this has been the Cynic Weekly. Lots of Celtic content at the Cynic.co. Lots of Celtic games coming up. Let's get involved. We'll speak to you down the road.